Alright, let's get tying the blue dart. So many of you are probably familiar with the red dart. What you probably didn't know is that at the same time that the red dart came out, there was also a blue dart. Insert 12 to 15-year-old adolescent male jokes anywhere you like. It is a funny name. But the blue dart has its days, its glory days in the hot sun. It is a fun fly to tie, and it's a great fly to fish. Sometimes the fish go absolutely nuts for blue colors. So I've got once again, a jig hook in the vise. This is a size 14 hook with a 3.5 millimeter bead. You could vary the bead size based on, again, how much weight you want. So if you want a really heavy fly on this size hook, you can put a 4 mil bead. If you wanted a light fly, you could put a 2.5 or a 2.8 or a 3. This is a 3.5, so a 3.5 or a 3.3 would be somewhere in the middle of the weights for a 14 in my opinion. So anyway, gold bead, slotted, tungsten. I'm going to use some UTC Ultra Thread 70 in red. Seems a little crazy on a blue fly, I know, but we're just going to cover the body anyway, and we're going to have a little red hot spot right behind the bead. So I'm going to start the thread, work it towards the bend of the hook. I'm going to take some blue hackle fibers, which you can almost see against my blue shirt, and pull a few of these off. I don't know how many are here. I'm probably pinching maybe close to a 1/2 inch worth to make a tail like that. If you're tying it bigger, you might need more. If you're tying it smaller, you might need less. I've tried to keep the tips relatively even, though I can see that I've failed. See if I can save them. I want to try and keep those tips as even as possible to make a nice clean fly. That's a little better. Still not perfect, but good enough. Then I'm going to capture them with a thread right on top of the hook and rotate all the way to the bead. Now, one note on this fly, if you want to make it even heavier, you could add lead wire underneath the body. That would be just fine. It makes a little thicker body. It does add a little weight. I've kind of gotten more and more to where I don't add much weight to my flies other than the tungsten bead. But you sure can. If you want to make it just a little heavier, you could add a little bit of lead wire under there. Next up, I'm going to add some sulky tinsel in the bright sulky tinsel in the opal color, 8040, I believe this one is. And then I'm going to add some 7X tippet, and I'm going to tie both of these in at the same time. So I've got both those on my fingers. I'm going to capture them with the thread and then draw them down to where they're kind of tucked right behind that bead. Tie them both in full length, that way I don't get a tie-in bump at the back of the fly. Next up, we're going to add dubbing. This is the blue dubbing for blue dart, Ice Dub Kingfisher Blue. Nice bright blue flashy dubbing. So I'm going to add a little bit of that to the thread for the body. And as always, we get a lot of comments on ice dubbing. People have a hard time with dubbing in general. Ice dubbing is a little bit coarse, so I'm pulling up very, very small amounts, as you can see there, and adding them to the thread. It's kind of out of the frame, I realize, but you're not trying to add all of this dubbing at once. You're trying to pull small amounts of dubbing from that to add to make a relatively small diameter, let's call it, a very thin dubbing noodle. And I'm going to slide that up to the hook and more or less cover the thread. If it's not perfectly covered, I'm not too worried about it. I'm still going to run 2 ribs through this. So if it's not perfectly level or any of that, I can use the 2 ribbings to kind of mash some of that down. So I've got the dubbing all the way to the bead. Now I'm going to take the sulky tinsel and I'm going to counter wrap. And I have a little bit of a bump of dubbing you can see right there at the back. And I'm going to try and capture just like that with this tinsel. And I'm going to counter wrap the tinsel, so wrapping the opposite direction I did with my thread. So that counter wraps the dubbing all the way to the bead. Smooths out my body just a little bit. Tie it off, get rid of the excess. Then I'm going to take the 7X tippet and wrap it the same direction as the thread. And once again, if there are any bumps or anything that you want to smooth out, you can space this out so that you capture any of that loose dubbing with the ribbing. But as the fish eat this, the dubbing is going to get more and more teased out, so I wouldn't worry too much about a perfect body. If it looks pretty good to you, the fish are going to agree. All right, now we've got the blue body in place. Next up, I'm going to use a hen hackle. You could use brown, you could use furnace, you could use Greenwell, any of those. I'm going to grab the tips of this and then stroke the fibers back to make the top just like that. Then I'm going to trim a little notch so that I can capture that with the thread. I'm going to grab that little notch right behind the bead, throw a couple of wraps in with tension, and then I'm just going to do one turn with this hackle. Once all the way around, capture it again with the thread. You can tie your soft hackles from the butt of the feather. If you'd rather do it the other direction, that's fine. This is the way I tend to do it because I like to hold on to the butt end of the feather. So this stuff down here that's not usable, that's what I like to hold on to. And I can get several more flies out of this same feather that way without having to waste the good parts of it. Then I just stroke the fibers back with my fingers, run over them with the thread a couple of times, just stroke them backward. Notice the sparseness of the hackle. You don't want 2 or 3 wraps of hackle here. You want it nice and sparse. And then the last step is to add our hot spot, ice dub and UV pink. Magic dubbing right there. Fish like this color. So again, just a tiny bit of dubbing, not very much. Less is more, just like always. Dubbing. Make that as tight as possible. I'm going to just cover the thread right behind the bead with that pink dubbing, and then we're going to whip finish and try and create a little bit of a band of red right behind the bead. Sometimes I'll whip finish these 2 or 3 times to make that band and also give it several knots so that should one of the thread wraps come undone, I've got some backups. Okay, once we've got that, we can trim that out of the way. I've got one rogue piece of dubbing there that's going to bother me, so I'm going to trim it away. Just a couple more up here on my bead. To the naked eye, I can't even see those. I can only see them in the macro, so they're going to drive me crazy there. But that's it, the finished blue dart. You can see it's very similar to the red dart, except that it's got the blue tail and blue body. The hackle and the thorax dubbing, the red thread, the gold bead are all the same. Give that one a whirl. I think you'll like the old blue dart.